The first time anyone sees desperation in its purest form, it claws at your heart in a way you can't forget. That morning, the winter wind bit through the narrow streets of Pineville, leaving a thin frost on the edges of every windowsill. Outside, the bakery on Elm Street radiated warmth like a small beacon against the biting cold. And inside, standing by the counter with trembling hands, was Mara Jennings, a woman whose world had quietly collapsed around her. She stared at the tray of golden bread, the kind that smelled like home, like safety, and for a fleeting second, she imagined being able to bring even a small piece of it to her son, Jamie. But when the cashier finally tallied her order, her heart sank. She only had enough for a single slice. Her eyes darted nervously to the man behind her in line, a figure so sharply dressed it seemed like he stepped out of a magazine. He was tall, with silver-threaded hair and a presence that demanded attention without trying. This was Isaac Callahan, CEO of Callahan Enterprises, and for a moment, he seemed to radiate the kind of confidence that made the air itself feel warmer. But Mara couldn't think about him, or his wealth, or the polite curiosity in the eyes of other customers. She could only think about Jamie's face, his soft brown eyes that were beginning to look too big for a world that seemed cruel. Mara placed the single coin on the counter, the metal clinking softly, almost like a whisper of her shame. "Just one slice, please," she murmured, her voice barely carrying over the soft hum of the bakery heater. Her hand shook as she waited, afraid, embarrassed, and on the verge of tears. Her pride felt like it was cracking into pieces. Then something happened that she would never forget. Isaac, the man she thought would just glance at her and walk away, stepped closer. He looked at her coin, then at her worn coat, the holes at the elbows, and the tired lines etched on her face. And he smiled, not a patronizing smile, but a human, real, and understanding one. "Sit down," he said, his voice calm yet firm. "Eat first." Time seemed to pause. Mara blinked, frozen in disbelief. The bakery, the frost outside, the hum of the ovens, everything faded into a strange, surreal quiet. I can't," she stammered, words tangled in her throat. But he gently shook his head, motioning toward an empty table near the window. "Please, you look like you haven't had a proper meal in days. Sit." At that moment, something inside her cracked, not in shame, but in relief. Mara sat, her hands trembling as she accepted the steaming slice of bread. The aroma filled her senses, and for the first time in weeks, she felt the warmth of hope sneak into her chest. As she took her first bite, she realized that kindness didn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it arrived quietly, through a simple act of humanity. Isaac didn't sit across from her. Instead, he stood near the counter, pretending to browse the pastries but keeping a careful eye on her. He was a man who had learned early on how heavy life could be, the sort of weight that could crush even the strongest spirit. And he saw in Mara something familiar, a fierce love for someone else, a fire burning despite unbearable circumstances. Mara finished her small meal, feeling the warmth spread through her body. She dared a small, grateful smile toward Isaac, unsure if she had the words to thank him. But before she could speak, he interrupted her thoughts. "You don't have to pay for that today," he said. "Consider it a gift. And if you need more, come back. We'll figure it out." Her eyes filled with tears, hot and unrelenting. I don't even know how to thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. She swallowed, afraid she'd collapse into sobs. Isaac placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, the gesture simple, human, grounding. "You don't need to thank me. Just promise me something." He paused, letting her look up at him, letting the sunlight streaming through the bakery windows illuminate her tear-streaked face. "Promise me you won't give up." Mara nodded, a single word that carried the weight of her entire life. "I promise." The next few weeks brought small miracles. Mara began visiting the bakery more often, not for free bread, though Isaac had assured her she was always welcome, but for the sense of dignity it restored, the chance to sit down and breathe for a few moments. Slowly, she began to piece together a life she thought she had lost. She found work cleaning offices in the early morning, finishing just in time to pick Jamie up from school. Life remained hard, but for the first time in months, it felt manageable, even hopeful. Isaac, meanwhile, found himself drawn into her world in ways he had never expected. He had been a single father for 5 years, raising his daughter, Clara, alone after his wife's sudden death. He understood the exhaustion of parenthood, the quiet desperation of trying to provide everything for someone who depended entirely on you. Watching Mara and Jamie navigate their struggles reminded him of Clara, and he admired the resilience in Mara, a resilience that reminded him of himself. It was on a rainy afternoon, 3 weeks after their first encounter, that Mara found herself trapped without an umbrella, drenched to the bone, running toward the bakery. When she entered, dripping and shivering, Isaac was there, leaning casually against the counter. He frowned, seeing her state, and immediately handed her a warm coat from the shelf behind him. "You're going to catch your death out there," he said softly. She hesitated, then accepted it, overwhelmed by the simple, caring gesture. That day, they talked longer than ever before, sharing stories of loss, resilience, and hope. Mara told him about Jamie's father, who had abandoned them before Jamie was born, about the nights she had gone without food so that he could eat. Isaac shared tales of corporate battles, of mistakes that cost him dearly, and of the loneliness that sometimes came with wealth and power. And as they talked, a bridge formed between two very different lives, built entirely from empathy, understanding, and quiet acts of generosity. Mara began to realize that kindness didn't always have a grand stage. Sometimes it was sitting down beside a stranger, offering bread, and saying, "Eat first. Everything else can wait." That lesson carried her through nights filled with anxiety and days that stretched endlessly. And for Isaac, it was a reminder that true wealth was measured not in bank accounts or stock portfolios, but in the capacity to touch someone else's life. Months later, Mara's life had begun to change in ways she never imagined. She found a better-paying job at a local daycare, close enough that she could still spend time with Jamie. She discovered that the world wasn't always harsh and unyielding, that generosity still existed in quiet corners, in small towns, and in the hearts of people who understood struggle. And every time she passed the bakery, she smiled, a private thank you lingering in her heart for the man who had given her more than bread. He had given her hope. Isaac, too, found a subtle joy in watching Mara and Jamie flourish. He continued his work, continued raising Clara, but he now carried a quiet pride in knowing that he had made a tangible difference in someone's life. The connection he shared with Mara reminded him that life's most profound moments were often unplanned, arriving like a warm hand in the cold, steadying you when you needed it most. And one crisp morning, as Mara sat with Jamie enjoying the simple comfort of warm bread, she realized something that would stay with her forever. Even in the depths of despair, a single act of kindness could rewrite the course of a life. A warm smile, a chair pulled out, a hand placed on a shoulder. These were not just gestures. They were lifelines. And she understood, in the quiet heart of Pineville, that she had been given one of life's rarest gifts, a second chance. If you felt a spark of hope from Mara's story, if Isaac's simple act of kindness reminded you of the power we all have to change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Bright Hearts. Let's show the world that a little compassion goes a long way. Before we end, I want to ask you to take a moment to honor those who have extended kindness to you in your own life, perhaps a friend, a mentor, or even a stranger. Sometimes, remembering those moments can inspire us to be the light for someone else. And as Mara and Jamie walked home that day, the sun breaking through clouds, she held his small hand tightly and whispered a promise, not just to herself, but to the world, to never forget that hope can be found in the smallest acts of humanity. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below to share your thoughts and experiences. Let's spread kindness, one story at a time.